The autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees at Cedar Grove Park, where children's laughter echoed across the playground on a peaceful Sunday afternoon. Among the weekend crowd, a tall, well-dressed black man in his mid-30s watched proudly as his 6-year-old daughter zoomed down the spiral slide, her blonde curls bouncing with each movement. He had just finished a major architectural project and decided to spend quality time with his little girl at their favorite spot. "Did you see how fast I went, Daddy?" The little girl squealed with delight, running back to the slide's ladder for another go. Her father's warm smile and gentle encouragement made her beam with pride. They had been coming to this park every weekend for the past 2 years, ever since the adoption was finalized, and it had become their special place. Just across the playground, near the duck pond, a middle-aged woman in an expensive cream-colored cardigan and pearl necklace sat on a bench, her fingers drumming nervously on her designer handbag. She had been watching the father-daughter duo for the past 15 minutes, a frown deepening with each passing moment. As the neighborhood's self-appointed guardian, she prided herself on knowing everyone who lived in the surrounding blocks, and something about this pair didn't sit right with her. The father helped his daughter tie her loose shoelace, their matching superhero t-shirts visible under their fall jackets, a special daddy-daughter purchase from their last shopping trip. The little girl chatted animatedly about her upcoming school play, where she would be playing a dancing tree. Her father listened intently, offering enthusiastic responses to every detail she shared. But the woman's suspicious gaze never wavered. She pulled out her phone and began typing furiously, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the screen. The father noticed her stares but chose to focus on his daughter instead. He had encountered such behavior before and had learned that the best response was to continue being the loving parent he was. Other children at the playground invited the little girl to join their game of tag, and she looked to her father for permission. With a gentle nod from him, she raced off to play with her new friends, their giggles mixing with the others. The father settled on a nearby bench, keeping a watchful eye while pulling out his daughter's water bottle and snack from their Batman backpack, her choice, of course. The woman's anxiety seemed to escalate as she watched this normal family scene unfold. She stood up, pacing slightly, then sat back down, her phone now pressed against her ear. Her voice, though trying to stay hushed, carried across the playground. "Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious individual. Yes, at Cedar Grove Park. No, he's with a little white girl. I just want to make sure everything's okay." The father's heart sank as he heard these words, a familiar weight settling in his chest. He had hoped their neighborhood would be different, had believed things were changing. His hand instinctively moved to the inside pocket of his jacket, where he kept a copy of the adoption papers, a sad necessity he had learned to carry after previous incidents. Other parents at the playground began to notice the unfolding situation. A few regular parkgoers who had seen the father and daughter every weekend exchanged concerned glances, recognizing the injustice that was about to unfold. The little girl, still playing tag with her new friends, remained blissfully unaware of the growing tension. The sound of distant sirens grew closer, and the father took a deep breath, preparing himself for what was to come. He watched his daughter's joyful play, wanting to protect her from the harsh realities of other people's prejudices for as long as possible. The peaceful Sunday afternoon at their favorite park was about to become yet another life lesson neither of them had asked for, but one they would face together with dignity and strength. 2 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot, their lights flashing but sirens now silent. The woman stood up, clutching her designer bag like a shield, ready to approach the officers as soon as they stepped out of their vehicles. The father remained seated, his posture straight but relaxed, knowing that staying calm was crucial for his daughter's sake. He pulled out his phone, opened his photo gallery full of family pictures, and waited for the next chapter of this all-too-familiar story to begin. The police cruiser's lights painted the playground equipment in alternating flashes of red and blue, drawing curious glances from families throughout the park. The father remained seated, his heart racing but his exterior calm, as he watched his daughter continuing to play with her new friends. He wanted to protect her from what was about to unfold, but he also knew these moments would eventually become teaching opportunities about strength and dignity. Before the officers could even step out of their vehicles, the woman in the cream cardigan practically sprinted across the playground, her heels clicking against the concrete path. "Officers! Officers! she called out, waving her manicured hands. I'm the one who called. I've been watching that man for the past half hour, and something just isn't right. The first officer, a veteran with salt and pepper hair who had served the community for 20 years, raised his hand calmly, trying to slow the woman's rushed approach. His younger partner, meanwhile, scanned the playground, quickly spotting the father on the bench, who was now standing slowly with his hands visible. Ma'am, please lower your voice, the veteran officer said, noticing how other parents were starting to gather their children. We'll handle this. But the woman wasn't finished. She pointed dramatically at the father, her voice carrying across the entire playground. That man has been here with a little white girl. They don't look related at all. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, and I've never seen them before. The father took a deep breath and called out gently to his daughter, Sweetie, come here for a minute. The little girl, still giggling from her game, ran over with boundless energy. Did you see me playing tag, Daddy? I was so fast. She wrapped her arms around his legs, completely oblivious to the tension around her. Several parents who had been regular parkgoers began pulling out their phones, some recording, others pulling up their own photos from past weekends, showing the father and daughter playing at the same park. A young mother pushing a stroller stepped forward, her face flushed with anger at the situation. Officers, this is ridiculous. They're here every weekend. That's his daughter. The woman in the cardigan wasn't deterred. She marched closer, her designer bag swinging wildly. How do you know that? Do you have proof? We have to be vigilant in these times. The father, still keeping one hand on his daughter's shoulder, reached into his jacket with the other, pulling out a worn envelope. The younger officer approached cautiously, but his stance relaxed as he got closer and saw the little girl's comfortable demeanor with her father. The father spoke softly, conscious of his daughter's presence. I have our adoption papers right here, officer. I carry them everywhere, just in case. His voice carried a weight of exhaustion that spoke of similar experiences in the past. Other parents had formed a loose circle around the scene, many of them regular faces at the park. A grandfather who often brought his own grandchildren spoke up, his voice firm but controlled. I've watched that man push his daughter on those swings every weekend for 2 years. He's a better parent than most I've seen come through here. The woman's face began to redden, but instead of backing down, she raised her chin defiantly. Well, I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, and I have a responsibility to this community. I demand to see your supervisor, she declared, turning to the officers. This is exactly the kind of situation we need to investigate thoroughly. The veteran officer, who had been quietly observing the scene, stepped forward. Ma'am, making false reports and disturbing the peace are serious matters. He turned to the father and daughter with a gentle smile. Sir, I believe I've seen you at the community center's father-daughter dance last month. The little girl's face lit up at the mention of the dance. Daddy and I did the chicken dance, and he knew all the moves. Her innocent joy cut through the tension, causing several onlookers to smile despite the serious situation. The father nodded, gratitude visible in his eyes for the officer's recognition. More phones had appeared among the gathered crowd, recording the woman's increasingly agitated behavior. A teenager on a nearby bench looked up from her phone, her eyes widening. Oh wow, this is already trending on local social media. Someone posted the beginning of all this a few minutes ago. The woman's face shifted from righteous indignation to uncertainty as she noticed the many phones pointed in her direction. The younger officer finished reviewing the adoption papers and handed them back respectfully. Everything's in order here, ma'am. In fact, he added with a meaningful look at the woman, the only concerning behavior we've observed today has been the unfounded harassment of a father and his daughter. The police cruiser's lights painted the playground equipment in alternating flashes of red and blue, drawing curious glances from families throughout the park. The father remained seated, his heart racing but his exterior calm, as he watched his daughter continuing to play with her new friends. He wanted to protect her from what was about to unfold, but he also knew these moments would eventually become teaching opportunities about strength and dignity. Before the officers could even step out of their vehicles, the woman in the cream cardigan practically sprinted across the playground, her heels clicking against the concrete path. Officers, officers, she called out, waving her manicured hands. I'm the one who called. I've been watching that man for the past half hour, and something just isn't right. The first officer, a veteran with salt and pepper hair who had served the community for 20 years, raised his hand calmly, trying to slow the woman's rushed approach. His younger partner, meanwhile, scanned the playground, quickly spotting the father on the bench, who was now standing slowly with his hands visible. "Ma'am, please lower your voice," the veteran officer said, noticing how other parents were starting to gather their children. "We'll handle this." But the woman wasn't finished. She pointed dramatically at the father, her voice carrying across the entire playground. "That man has been here with a little white girl. They don't look related at all. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, and I've never seen them before." The father took a deep breath and called out gently to his daughter, "Sweetie, come here for a minute." The little girl, still giggling from her game, ran over with boundless energy. "Did you see me playing tag, Daddy? I was so fast." She wrapped her arms around his legs, completely oblivious to the tension around her. Several parents who had been regular parkours began pulling out their phones, some recording, others pulling up their own photos from past weekends, showing the father and daughter playing at the same park. A young mother pushing a stroller stepped forward, her face flushed with anger at the situation. "Officers, this is ridiculous. They're here every weekend. That's his daughter." The woman in the cardigan wasn't deterred. She marched closer, her designer bag swinging wildly. "How do you know that? Do you have proof? We have to be vigilant in these times." The father, still keeping one hand on his daughter's shoulder, reached into his jacket with the other, pulling out one envelope. The younger officer approached cautiously, but his stance relaxed as he got closer and saw the little girl's comfortable demeanor with her father. The father spoke softly, conscious of his daughter's presence. "I have our adoption papers right here, officer. I carry them everywhere, just in case." His voice carried a weight of exhaustion that spoke of similar experiences in the past. Other parents had formed a loose circle around the scene, many of them regular faces at the park. A grandfather who often brought his own grandchildren spoke up, his voice firm but controlled. "I've watched that man push his daughter on those swings every weekend for 2 years. He's a better parent than most I've seen come through here." The woman's face began to redden, but instead of backing down, she raised her chin defiantly. "Well, I'm the president of the Homeowners Association, and I have a responsibility to this community. I demand to see your supervisor," she declared, turning to the officers. "This is exactly the kind of situation we need to investigate thoroughly." The veteran officer, who had been quietly observing the scene, stepped forward. "Ma'am, making false reports and disturbing the peace are serious matters." He turned to the father and daughter with a gentle smile. "Sir, I believe I've seen you at the community center's father-daughter dance last month." The little girl's face lit up at the mention of the dance. "Daddy and I did the chicken dance, and he knew all the moves." Her innocent joy cut through the tension, causing several onlookers to smile despite the serious situation. The father nodded, gratitude visible in his eyes for the officer's recognition. More phones had appeared among the gathered crowd, recording the woman's increasingly agitated behavior. A teenager on a nearby bench looked up from her phone, her eyes widening. "Oh wow, this is already trending on local social media. Someone posted the beginning of all this a few minutes ago." The woman's face shifted from righteous indignation to uncertainty as she noticed the many phones pointed in her direction. The younger officer finished reviewing the adoption papers and handed them back respectfully. "Everything's in order here, ma'am." In fact, he added with a meaningful look at the woman, "The only concerning behavior we've observed today has been the unfounded harassment of a father and his daughter." The next morning dawned with an unexpected buzz around the quiet suburban community. The father sat at his kitchen table, his architectural drawings temporarily forgotten as his phone kept lighting up with notifications. The viral video from yesterday's park incident had spread far beyond their local community, and the truth was emerging in ways he never expected. His daughter bounced into the kitchen in her favorite unicorn pajamas, completely unaware of how their Sunday afternoon had become a national talking point. "Can I have chocolate chip pancakes, Daddy?" she asked, climbing onto her usual chair. He smiled, grateful that her innocent world remained unchanged despite yesterday's events. Meanwhile, across town, the HOA president's morning was taking a very different turn. As she prepared for her regular Monday morning at the real estate office, her own phone was exploding with messages, but not the kind she had expected. Instead of support for her vigilant citizenship, she found herself facing a tsunami of public outrage. The local community Facebook group, usually filled with posts about lost pets and yard sale announcements, had transformed into a forum of revelation. Longtime residents began sharing their own stories of encounters with the HOA president. His South Asian family posted about how she had questioned their right to use the community pool last summer. An elderly Hispanic couple revealed how she had repeatedly reported their family gatherings as suspicious activities. At the father's architectural firm, his colleagues gathered around his desk with coffee and supportive words. His boss, a stern woman who rarely showed emotion, placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're creating a new diversity and inclusion initiative," she announced, "and we'd like you to lead it." The firm's website had already received dozens of messages praising their employees' dignity during the incident. The morning news picked up the story, but not in the way that HOA president had intended. Local reporters discovered that the father wasn't just any architect. He had designed several community centers in underprivileged neighborhoods, offering free architectural services to help revitalize struggling areas. His daughter's adoption story became a beacon of hope, showcasing how love knows no racial boundaries. By midday, the police department held a press conference. The veteran officer who had responded to the scene spoke directly to the cameras. "What we witnessed yesterday was a reminder that prejudice has no place in our community," he stated firmly. "Our officers are trained to respond to legitimate concerns, not unfounded racial bias." The father's phone rang again. This time it was the director of a local adoption agency. "Your story has touched so many hearts," the director said warmly. "Would you consider speaking at our upcoming family diversity workshop? We have so many potential parents who could learn from your experiences." Back at the real estate office, the HOA president's colleagues couldn't ignore the mounting evidence of her past behavior. Former clients began calling in, sharing stories of how she had accidentally missed showing houses to minority families. The company's HR department called an emergency meeting, their phones ringing non-stop with concerned stakeholders. A group of neighborhood kids drew a colorful chalk mural on the sidewalk near the park. "Love makes a family," read the wobbly letters, surrounded by stick figures of all colors holding hands. The father's daughter added her own artistic touch, a purple heart with the words, "Best Daddy Ever," in childlike scroll. The story reached national parenting blogs and social justice forums. Messages of support flooded in from other adoptive families, sharing their own stories of prejudice and resilience. A hashtag started trending, #LoveMakeSoFamily, accompanied by photos of diverse families from across the country. The HOA board called an emergency meeting for that evening. The father received an invitation to attend, along with an official apology from the board members who had reviewed security footage from the park's cameras, confirming the ongoing pattern of harassment by their president. The HOA board called an emergency meeting for that evening. The father received an invitation to attend, along with an official apology from the board members who had reviewed security footage from the park's cameras, confirming the ongoing pattern of harassment by their president. As the father helped his daughter with her homework that afternoon, a neighbor knocked on their door with a homemade lasagna. "We should have done this months ago," she said apologetically. "Welcome to the neighborhood," officially. More neighbors followed, each bringing dishes, welcome cards, and sincere apologies for not speaking up sooner. The local ice cream shop, where they had sought refuge after the incident, posted a sign in their window, "All families welcome here." They named a new sundae combination after the father and daughter, a sweet and simple gesture that made his little girl giggle with delight. By evening, the story had evolved from one of discrimination to one of community transformation. The father sat on their porch swing, his daughter curled up beside him reading her favorite bedtime story. Neighbors waved as they walked by, some stopping to chat, others just offering warm smiles. The tension that had often lingered beneath the surface of their daily lives began to dissolve. "Daddy," his daughter asked sleepily, "can we go back to the park tomorrow?" Her simple question carried the weight of innocence, trust, and hope. He hugged her closer, watching the sunset paint their changing neighborhood in shades of gold. "Yes, sweetheart," he answered softly. "We can go anywhere you want. This is our home." The video clip started simply enough. A shaky phone recording of a peaceful Sunday afternoon disrupted by prejudice, but within 48 hours it had taken on a life of its own. Dad and daughter harassed at park became more than just a headline, it became a movement. The father sat in his home office, watching as the view counter on the original post climbed into the millions. His daughter was upstairs playing with her dolls, blissfully unaware that their story was touching hearts across the country. His phone buzzed constantly with messages of support, interview requests, and stories from other families who had faced similar situations. A popular morning show host shared the video on her personal social media account, adding her own powerful message. "This is what real parenting looks like, loving your child despite what others might think or say. Watch how this father maintains his dignity while protecting his daughter. This is the example we need." Comments flooded in from everywhere. "The way he stayed calm for his daughter, that's real strength. I'm crying watching this. My adopted siblings and parents went through the same thing. Look at how natural they are together. Love doesn't see color." Teen influencers picked up the story, creating their own videos about adoption and family diversity. One video, showing teenagers with their adoptive parents, gathered over 5 million views in just hours. The caption read, "Family is about love, not looks. #StandWithParkDad." Local news stations began digging deeper. They discovered the father's work as an architect, his volunteer efforts designing accessible playgrounds, and his involvement in youth mentoring programs. Each revelation added new layers to the story, showing how one person's prejudice had targeted a community hero. The daughter's elementary school principal released a heartfelt statement. "Our school celebrates all families. What happened at the park goes against everything we teach our children about acceptance and love. The father in this video volunteers at our school events, helps with our fundraisers, and represents the very best of our community." Social media platforms featured the story in their trending sections. #LoviesFamily, #ParkDadStrong, #FamilyOverHate, #AdoptionisLove. Each hashtag carried thousands of personal stories, photos, and messages of support. Adoptive families shared their journeys, their challenges, and their triumphs. The conversation expanded beyond just one incident to address deeper issues of prejudice and acceptance. The father received a message from a children's book author. "Your story moved me to tears. Would you consider letting me write a picture book about your experience? We need more stories that show children that families come in all forms." A group of local parents started an online fundraiser to create an inclusive family festival in the park where the incident occurred. The goal was set at $5,000. Within hours, they had raised over $50,000, with donations pouring in from across the globe. The HOA president's viral infamy grew as more videos surfaced. Security camera footage from the park showed her following other mixed-race families in previous weeks. Her social media history revealed a pattern of problematic comments, each one now being scrutinized by an angry public. Major news networks picked up the story, but the father carefully chose which interviews to accept. "I want to focus on the positive changes we can make," he explained to a reporter. "My daughter doesn't need to see anger, she needs to see progress." A popular podcast about modern families invited him to share his story. "The hardest part," he said during the interview, "isn't dealing with people like her. It's knowing that someday I'll have to explain to my daughter why some people can't see past color to recognize love." His words resonated deeply. Parents across social media began sharing discussions they'd had with their own children about racism and acceptance. Teachers requested permission to use the story in their classrooms to teach about diversity and kindness. The father's architectural firm's social media pages were flooded with supportive messages. Their post stating, "We stand with our employee and all families," became their most engaged content ever. Other companies began reaching out about collaboration opportunities for inclusive community projects. A documentary filmmaker contacted him about featuring their story in a series about modern families. "Your experience highlights both how far we've come and how far we still have to go," the proposal read. "But most importantly, it shows the power of a father's love." By the end of the week, the original park video had been viewed over 20 million times. But for the father, the most important viewer remained his 6-year-old daughter, who still didn't fully understand why their regular park visit had caused such a stir. As they sat together at breakfast, she asked, "Daddy, why are people taking so many pictures of us?" He smiled, spreading peanut butter on her toast just the way she liked it. "Because, sweetie, we're helping people understand that love is what makes a family special." She nodded, satisfied with this simple explanation, and went back to planning their next park adventure. The real estate office buzzed with unusual tension that Monday morning. The HOA president's desk sat empty, her designer coat still hanging on the rack. In the conference room, the company executives huddled around a laptop, reviewing email after email from past clients. "I was told my dream house was already sold," read one message from a young black couple. "But we drove by a week later and saw it was still available." Another email came from a Middle Eastern family. "She said the neighborhood wouldn't be a good fit for us." Now we know what she really meant. The company's reputation was taking hit after hit. Their social media manager showed the executives the latest statistics. Hundreds of negative reviews, thousands of angry comments, and countless shares of the park incident video tagged with their company name. In her corner office, the CEO, a woman who had built the company from scratch 30 years ago, rubbed her temples. The wall behind her displayed awards for community service and business excellence, achievements now overshadowed by this crisis. She pressed the intercom. "Please ask her to come in." The HOA president arrived wearing her usual perfect smile, but it faltered when she saw the thick folder on the CEO's desk. "These are complaints," the CEO said quietly. "Not just from Sunday, from the past 5 years." She opened the folder, revealing page after page of documented incidents. "But I was protecting our property values," the HOA president protested, her voice rising. "I was doing my job." The CEO held up her hand. "Your job was to sell homes, not decide who deserves to buy them. And now," she gestured to her computer screen, where the company's plummeting online ratings were displayed. Down the street, other real estate agencies began distancing themselves. "We celebrate diversity" signs appeared in their windows. One agency announced a partnership with local adoption agencies to help all families find their perfect homes. Another started a first-time homebuyer program specifically targeting underserved communities. The HOA president's phone kept buzzing. Her country club membership was under review. The charity boards she sat on sent polite but firm emails asking her to step down. Even her favorite luxury boutique, where she'd spent thousands, suggested she shop online for a while. Back at the office, the HR director entered with more files. Past employees had started speaking out. Stories emerged of qualified candidates being passed over, of racist comments during office parties, of a toxic culture that everyone had been too afraid to challenge. "I didn't mean for this to happen," the HOA president whispered, her perfectly manicured nails drumming on the armrest. The CEO looked at her longtime employee, seeing for the first time not a top seller, but a liability. "I know you didn't," she replied, "but it did happen, and it's been happening for years." The termination papers sat ready on the desk. No golden parachute, no fancy farewell party. Just a cardboard box for personal items and a security escort to the door. As she walked out, younger agents watched silently, some recording with their phones, others simply shaking their heads. Her designer heels clicked down the sidewalk one last time, past the windows where her sales awards had once hung. Already, a maintenance worker was removing her name from the parking spot she'd held for 15 years. Her car, usually washed and gleaming, was covered in bird droppings, a small but symbolic insult from the universe. At home, her email inbox filled with cancellations, speaking engagements revoked, club memberships suspended. The carefully curated social circle she'd built over decades began to crumble. Even her weekly tennis partners sent a group text. "We think it's best to take a break." The local business journal, which had once featured her in Women in Real Estate, now prepared a different kind of story. Their investigation uncovered a pattern of discrimination that spanned her entire career. Former colleagues finally felt safe enough to speak up, sharing incidents that had been buried under forced smiles and office politics. Her phone buzzed again. The HOA board had called an emergency meeting. Her position as president, once a source of pride and power, now hung by a thread. The same neighbors who had once feared her influence now openly challenged her authority. Meanwhile, the father she had targeted received an unexpected call. A prestigious real estate development firm wanted to discuss his architectural designs for inclusive community spaces. "Your experience," they said, "has shown us the importance of creating truly welcoming neighborhoods." The HOA president watched her carefully built life unravel through her living room window. The same neighbors who used to wave now crossed the street to avoid her. The morning power walks she led stood empty. No one showed up. The gossip network that once fed her information had gone silent. As evening fell, she sat alone in her perfectly decorated home, scrolling through social media. Her own daughter, away at college, had shared the park video with a simple comment, "Mom, we need to talk." The perfectly curated family image she'd maintained for years cracked like a mirror, showing the ugly truth beneath. Outside, the neighborhood kids played freely in the streets, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. The father and his daughter walked past her house, hand in hand, heading to a community meeting about making their neighborhood more inclusive. They didn't notice her watching from behind her expensive curtains, finally understanding the true cost of prejudice. The neighborhood came alive with an energy it had never known before. 2 weeks after the park incident, families gathered in the community center. The usual monthly meeting transformed into something much more meaningful. The father and his daughter sat in the front row, surrounded by supporters who had become friends. The old HOA board stepped down completely, making way for fresh perspectives. "We need leadership that reflects all our families," announced a longtime resident, his voice firm with conviction. The diverse crowd nodded in agreement, their usual silence replaced by determined participation. Local businesses joined the movement for change. The coffee shop on the corner put up a new sign, "All families welcome here," in rainbow letters. The owner, a quiet woman who had watched the neighborhood change over 30 years, started a weekly family Saturday where parents and kids could meet and connect over hot chocolate and cookies. The police department launched new training programs, with the veteran officer who had handled the park incident leading the way. "We're not just learning about what not to do," he explained during a community meeting. "We're learning how to actively support and protect all our residents." Children led the change in their own way. At the elementary school, the art teacher helped students create a massive mural. "Our community, our family," read the bright letters above drawings of people of all colors holding hands. The father's daughter proudly painted herself and her dad in the center, their matching superhero t-shirts captured in perfect detail. The local library started a new book club focusing on diverse family stories. Every weekend, parents and children gathered to read books about adoption, mixed-race families, and the true meaning of love. The father's daughter became a regular, always eager to share her own family's story during discussion time. A tech-savvy teenager created an app for the community, allowing neighbors to organize meetups, share resources, and support each other. "Need help with groceries? Can someone watch my kids? Who wants to join our weekend picnic?" The posts flowed daily, breaking down the invisible barriers that had divided them for so long. The community center transformed its programs. Cooking classes celebrated diverse cuisines, with neighbors teaching each other their family recipes. Exercise classes became family affairs, with parents and kids moving to music from around the world. The father taught an architecture workshop, showing kids how to design their dream playgrounds. Local real estate agents underwent voluntary training on fair housing practices. "We want to be part of the solution," declared one agency owner, hanging a new certification proudly in the window. They started hosting monthly seminars about homeownership for all families, making sure everyone felt welcome in their community. The park itself got a makeover. Families gathered for a weekend of painting, planting, and building. New benches, decorated with mosaic tiles made by local kids, invited people to sit and chat. A community garden sprouted up, with plots assigned by lottery to ensure fairness. The father helped design an accessible playground where children of all abilities could play together. Religious leaders from different faiths came together, hosting joint events that celebrated diversity. "Love is universal," said one leader during a community dinner. "It doesn't see color, religion, or background. It just sees family." The father's daughter charmed everyone by asking for seconds of every different cultural dish. The local news station, which had first covered the park incident, returned to document the changes. They found a transformed community. Neighbors who had once barely nodded to each other now stopped to chat. Children who had played in separate groups now ran together in mixed packs of laughter and friendship. A group of mothers started a monthly family photo day in the park. Professional photographers volunteered their time, capturing the beautiful diversity of their community. The photos lined the community center walls, showing the real faces of their neighborhood, every shade, every age, every type of family. The father's architectural firm got involved too, offering free consultations to make homes and public spaces more welcoming and accessible. His daughter became their unofficial consultant, insisting that every new design include spaces where kids could play together and parents could meet. Even the HOA meetings changed completely. Gone were the rigid rules about lawn height and fence colors. Instead, they discussed how to make the community more inclusive, how to support working parents, how to help elderly neighbors stay connected. The father joined the board, bringing his professional expertise and personal experience to every discussion. As summer turned to fall, the community organized its first Unity Festival in the park where it all began. Food trucks served dishes from around the world. Local bands played music that got everyone dancing. Children ran relay races in mixed teams, their parents cheering from the sidelines. The father watched his daughter teaching her friends a dance she had learned at school. Nearby, former strangers shared plates of homemade food and family stories. The park that had once been a place of confrontation had become a symbol of their transformation. "Daddy," his daughter called out, running over with a face painted like a butterfly, "come dance with us." As he joined the circle of dancing families, he caught sight of several phones recording the moment. But this time, the videos being shared would tell a different story, one of hope, change, and the true meaning of community. 6 months after the park incident, autumn leaves painted the neighborhood in warm colors once again. The community had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The father and his daughter still visited their favorite park, but now they were greeted by waves and warm smiles from everyone they passed. The former HOA president had moved from her large house to a small apartment in the next town over. Her designer clothes and luxury car were replaced by more modest choices, not just because of financial necessity, but because her priorities had shifted. The court-mandated sensitivity training she'd initially dreaded had become a turning point in her life. During one particularly powerful session, she broke down while watching videos of mixed-race families sharing their daily struggles. "I never thought about how it felt for them," she admitted, tissues crumpled in her hands. "I was so focused on protecting what I thought was important that I became the very thing threatening our community." Her daughter from college had refused to come home for weeks after the incident. But slowly, through long, honest phone calls and tearful video chats, they began rebuilding their relationship. "Mom," her daughter had said, "I need you to understand why this matters so much to me." She then revealed that her best friend at college was adopted, and the park incident had hit too close to home. At her new job, a small bookkeeping firm, she started at entry level despite her years of experience. Her coworkers knew about her past. The video had made sure of that. But they also saw her genuine efforts to change. During lunch breaks, she found herself sharing honest conversations with diverse colleagues, learning about their lives and experiences. Meanwhile, the father's architectural firm had become a leader in community-centered design. Their new projects focused on creating inclusive spaces where families of all backgrounds could feel welcome. The little girl's input had even inspired a playground design that encouraged children to play together regardless of their differences. The local police department transformed their training programs. The veteran officer who had handled the park incident now led workshops on community policing. "It's not just about responding to calls," he would tell new recruits. "It's about understanding the community we serve and recognizing our own biases." Adoption agencies across the state reported a surge in interest from diverse families. The father's story had sparked conversations about love transcending boundaries. His daughter's school started a family diversity celebration month where children proudly shared their unique family stories. One day, at a local coffee shop, the former HOA president came face to face with the father and his daughter. The little girl was happily sipping hot chocolate, whipped cream dotting her nose. For a moment, everything stood still. Then, gathering her courage, the woman approached their table. "I owe you an apology," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Not just for that day, but for every day I let my prejudice blind me to the beauty of families like yours." The father looked at her, seeing not the angry woman from the park, but someone who had been humbled by her own mistakes. His daughter, innocent as ever, piped up, "Daddy makes the best hot chocolate at home. He puts marshmallows and whipped cream." Her simple kindness brought tears to the woman's eyes. The father, after a thoughtful pause, pulled out a chair. "Would you like to join us?" That simple conversation became a monthly meeting. The former HOA president started volunteering at adoption support groups, sharing her story as a cautionary tale, but also as proof that people could change. Her daughter, inspired by the transformation, changed her college major to social work. The father's story became part of a larger movement. Companies began reviewing their hiring practices. Schools updated their curricula to include diverse family representations. Real estate agencies across the country implemented new training programs to ensure fair housing practices. The little girl grew an inch taller and learned to ride a bike without training wheels. She started a trend at school where children drew pictures of their families, creating a colorful hallway display that celebrated every kind of family. Her proud father took a photo of her standing next to her drawing, her smile as bright as ever. 1 year after the incident, the community gathered for the first annual Family Unity Festival in the same park where it all began. The former HOA president helped organize it, working alongside people she once would have viewed with suspicion. Children of all backgrounds played together on the playground, parents shared stories and food, and barriers continued to fall. The father watched his daughter play tag with her friends, her laughter mixing with dozens of other children's voices. A young couple considering adoption approached him for advice, and he shared his story, not the viral video version, but the real story of love, patience, and the joy of being a parent. As the sun set on the festival, the former HOA president helped clean up alongside other volunteers. She caught sight of her reflection in a window. The designer clothes and perfect makeup were gone, but so was the weight of prejudice she'd carried for so long. In its place was something far more valuable: understanding. The story could have ended in anger and division. Instead, it became a lesson in transformation, proving that while change isn't easy, it's always possible. The father and daughter continued their weekend park visits, but now they were just one of many diverse families enjoying their community, exactly as it should have been all along.